The golden autumn evening cast a warm glow over the historic Grandmont Theater, where hundreds of eager spectators gathered along the red carpet barriers. Tonight was the annual Royal Variety performance, and the entire kingdom of Aldermere buzzed with excitement. Prince Alexander and Princess Isabella of Aldermere were set to make their grand entrance, marking their first public appearance together since their wedding 6 months ago. Inside the royal limousine, Princess Isabella adjusted her stunning sapphire blue gown for the third time. The elegant dress, designed by the kingdom's most celebrated fashion house, shimmered with delicate silver embroidery that caught the light beautifully. Her dark hair was styled in an intricate updo, adorned with a vintage tiara that had belonged to Queen Mother Evangeline. "Are you nervous?" Prince Alexander asked, reaching over to gently squeeze his wife's gloved hand. He looked dashing in his formal military dress uniform, complete with ceremonial medals that represented his service to the kingdom. His warm brown eyes reflected genuine concern for Isabella, knowing how much she valued making a good impression on their subjects. Isabella took a deep breath and smiled. "A little," she admitted. "This is such an important tradition for the royal family. I want to honor it properly." She had spent weeks preparing for this evening, studying the history of the Royal Variety performance and learning about each of the acts they would be watching tonight. The Royal Variety performance had been a cherished tradition in Aldermere for over a century. Each year, the finest performers from across the kingdom and beyond would gather to showcase their talents before the royal family and distinguished guests. The event raised significant funds for the Royal Arts Foundation, which supported young artists and maintained cultural programs throughout the realm. As their motorcade approached the theater, the sound of cheering crowds grew louder. Photographers positioned themselves strategically, their cameras ready to capture every moment of the royal couple's arrival. The theater's ornate facade was illuminated with hundreds of warm lights, creating a magical atmosphere that befitted such a prestigious occasion. "Remember what we practiced," Alexander whispered to Isabella as their car came to a stop. "We'll take our time, greet the officials, and enjoy every moment. The people are here to celebrate with us, not to judge us." The car door opened, and Prince Alexander stepped out first, his posture confident and regal. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers, with many people waving small flags bearing the royal coat of arms. He turned and extended his hand to help Princess Isabella from the vehicle, and as she emerged, the crowd's enthusiasm reached new heights. Isabella's entrance was nothing short of breathtaking. Her gown flowed elegantly as she moved, and her radiant smile lit up the entire area. She waved gracefully to the assembled crowd, her natural warmth and genuine joy evident in every gesture. The couple stood together for a moment, allowing the photographers to capture their images before beginning their walk down the red carpet. Lord Chancellor Edmund Hartwell, the evening's host, approached the royal couple with a deep bow. He was an elderly gentleman with distinguished silver hair and kind eyes, who had served the royal family faithfully for over 30 years. "Your Royal Highnesses, welcome to the Grandmont Theater. We are deeply honored by your presence this evening." "The honor is ours, Lord Hartwell," Prince Alexander replied warmly. "We have been looking forward to this evening for months. Please, tell us about tonight's performers." As they walked slowly toward the theater entrance, Lord Hartwell explained that this year's show featured an exceptional lineup of talent. There was Elena Rodriguez, a young soprano from the kingdom's music academy whose voice had been compared to angels. The Blackwood Brothers, a comedy duo whose clever wordplay and physical humor had made them beloved across the realm, would be performing their latest routine. The program also included Marcus Chen, a brilliant pianist who had won international acclaim for his innovative interpretations of classical pieces. Perhaps most exciting was the appearance of the Skyward Dance Company, whose breathtaking aerial performances had captivated audiences worldwide. They had specifically choreographed a new piece for tonight's royal performance. Isabella listened intently to every detail, asking thoughtful questions about each performer's background and training. Her genuine interest in the arts had already made her popular among the kingdom's cultural community, and tonight would further cement her reputation as a patron of the performing arts. "Will we have the opportunity to meet the performers?" Isabella inquired, as they paused to greet several local dignitaries who had been invited to the event. "Absolutely, Your Highness," Lord Heartwell confirmed. "There will be a reception following the performance where you can congratulate the artists personally. Many of them are quite young and would be tremendously inspired by your encouragement." As they continued their procession, Isabella noticed a group of children from the local orphanage who had been given special seats near the entrance. She had specifically requested their inclusion in the guest list, believing that the magic of live performance should be accessible to all children regardless of their circumstances. Without hesitation, she approached the children, much to the delight of their caregivers and the surprise of the security detail. "Are you excited about the show tonight?" she asked a young girl who couldn't have been more than 8 years old. The little girl, initially shy, brightened immediately. "Yes, Your Highness. I've never seen a real theater before. It's so beautiful." Her enthusiasm was infectious, and soon Isabella was engaged in animated conversation with several of the children, asking about their favorite types of performances and promising that tonight would be truly special. Prince Alexander watched his wife with admiration. Her natural ability to connect with people of all ages and backgrounds was one of the qualities he loved most about her. He joined the conversation, kneeling down to speak with a young boy who was particularly interested in magic tricks. The photographers captured these spontaneous moments, but Isabella and Alexander were completely focused on the children, making each one feel important and valued. This genuine care for their subjects had quickly made them beloved figures throughout the kingdom. After spending several minutes with the children, the royal couple was gently guided toward the theater entrance by their security team, who were mindful of the evening's schedule. The lobby of the Grandmont Theater was a magnificent space, with soaring ceilings adorned with crystal chandeliers and walls lined with portraits of legendary performers who had graced this stage over the decades. Distinguished guests filled the lobby, including members of parliament, foreign ambassadors, successful business leaders, and prominent figures from the arts community. Everyone was dressed in their finest attire, creating a sea of elegant gowns and formal evening wear. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation and the joy of being part of such a significant cultural celebration. Isabella was introduced to several international visitors, including the ambassador from the neighboring kingdom of Viridian and a renowned theater director from across the sea. Her education and natural curiosity served her well as she engaged in meaningful conversations about cultural exchange and the importance of supporting artistic endeavors. Prince Alexander, meanwhile, spoke with several veterans who had been invited as honored guests. His military background allowed him to connect easily with these men and women who had served their country with distinction. Their conversation touched on the therapeutic value of the arts for those recovering from the trauma of service, a cause that was particularly close to Alexander's heart. As the lobby began to empty and guests made their way to their seats, Lord Heartwell approached the royal couple once more. "Your Highnesses, if you're ready, I would be honored to escort you to the royal box." The royal box was located in the perfect position to view the stage, elevated and centered to provide the best possible view of the performances. The box itself was beautifully appointed with comfortable seating upholstered in rich burgundy velvet, and small side tables held crystal glasses and light refreshments. As Prince Alexander and Princess Isabella took their seats, the entire theater turned to acknowledge their presence. The audience rose in respectful applause, and the royal couple acknowledged their welcome with gracious waves and warm smiles. Isabella felt a surge of emotion at the warmth of their reception, realizing how much this moment meant to everyone present. The theater lights began to dim, signaling that the performance was about to begin. Isabella reached for Alexander's hand, squeezing it gently as they prepared to enjoy an evening of exceptional entertainment. The curtain was about to rise on what would prove to be an unforgettable night, filled with artistic brilliance, unexpected surprises, and moments that would strengthen the bond between the royal family and their beloved subjects. The stage lights illuminated, casting a golden glow across the velvet curtain, and the entire theater fell into an expectant hush. Princess Isabella felt her heart race with anticipation, knowing that they were about to witness some of the finest talent their kingdom had to offer, while also participating in a tradition that connected them to generations of royalty who had sat in this very box before them. The magnificent velvet curtain rose slowly, revealing a stage transformed into a celestial wonderland. Hundreds of twinkling lights created the illusion of stars scattered across a midnight blue backdrop, while gentle smoke effects added an ethereal quality to the opening scene. The audience collectively held their breath as Elena Rodriguez appeared center stage, her flowing white gown seeming to float around her like gossamer. Princess Isabella leaned forward slightly in her seat, captivated by the young soprano's presence even before she began to sing. Elena had grown up in a small village on the outskirts of the kingdom, discovered by a traveling music teacher who recognized her extraordinary gift. Now, at just 22 years old, she stood before royalty and the kingdom's most distinguished citizens. When Elena's voice filled the grand theater, it was as if time stood still. She performed an aria from the classical opera Moonlight's Embrace, her crystal-clear soprano soaring effortlessly through the complex passages. The acoustics of the Grandmont Theater, renowned throughout the world, carried every nuance of her performance to every corner of the venue. Prince Alexander watched his wife's face as much as the performance itself, seeing the genuine emotion and appreciation in Isabella's expression. The princess had studied music during her education, and she understood the technical difficulty of what they were witnessing. Elena's breath control was flawless, her vibrato warm and controlled, and her emotional interpretation brought tears to many eyes in the audience. As the aria reached its climactic high note, Elena's voice seemed to touch the very rafters of the theater. She held the note with stunning power and clarity, her face radiant with the joy of performing. The audience was completely silent, afraid to break the spell she had cast over them. When the final note faded into silence, the theater erupted in thunderous applause. Elena curtsied deeply toward the royal box, her eyes bright with unshed tears of joy and gratitude. Princess Isabella rose to her feet, leading a standing ovation that spread throughout the entire venue. The young soprano's performance had been nothing short of magical. As Elena left the stage, her place was taken by the Blackwood brothers, Harold and Frederick, whose entrance immediately shifted the mood from sublime to delightfully comedic. The brothers, both in their 30s, had been performing together since childhood, developing a unique style that combined clever wordplay, physical comedy, and audience interaction. They appeared dressed as incompetent royal guards, their uniforms slightly too large, and their ceremonial swords comically oversized. Harold, the taller of the two, immediately began a routine about the difficulties of protecting royalty when you can't tell the difference between a threat and a small dog. His deadpan delivery contrasted perfectly with Frederick's exaggerated reactions and pratfalls. "I say, Frederick," Harold announced pompously, "tonight we must be extra vigilant. I've heard there are dangerous performers in the building who might attempt to entertain the royal family." Frederick gasped dramatically, looking directly at the royal box. "Oh, no. What if they succeed? What if the royals actually enjoy themselves?" He pretended to faint, only to pop back up immediately with a mischievous grin. Princess Isabella found herself laughing genuinely at their antics, appreciating their clever wordplay and the gentle way they poked fun at royal protocol without being disrespectful. Prince Alexander was equally amused, particularly enjoying a routine about the challenges of walking in ceremonial dress while maintaining royal dignity. The brothers incorporated elements of juggling into their act, tossing increasingly ridiculous objects between them while maintaining their dialogue. They started with traditional balls, moved to fake crowns, and eventually were juggling rubber chickens while discussing the finer points of royal etiquette. Their timing was impeccable, and their chemistry as performers was evident in every gesture and glance. For their finale, they invited a volunteer from the audience to participate in a royal training exercise. An elderly gentleman from the front row gamely joined them on stage, where he was given a mock crown and taught the proper way to wave to subjects. The bit was gentle and inclusive, making the volunteer the hero of the joke rather than the target. As the Blackwood brothers took their bows, Prince Alexander applauded enthusiastically. "They're remarkable," he whispered to Isabella. "Comedy is perhaps the most difficult art form to master, and they make it look effortless." The third act brought a complete change of pace as Marcus Chen, the internationally acclaimed pianist, took the stage. A sleek black grand piano had been positioned center stage during the brief intermission, and Marcus approached it with the quiet confidence of a master craftsman approaching his tools. Marcus was a slight man in his early 40s, originally from the eastern provinces of the kingdom. His reputation had grown steadily over 2 decades of performance, but his interpretations of classical works had recently caught the attention of music critics worldwide. Tonight he would be performing his own arrangement of pieces by the kingdom's greatest composer, Aldermere's own Master Wilhelm Thornfield. As Marcus settled at the piano bench and placed his hands on the keys, the theater fell silent once again. He began with a gentle, contemplative piece that Thornfield had written for a lost love. Marcus's interpretation was deeply personal, each note carrying emotional weight that spoke to the universal human experience of loss and remembrance. Isabella closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music wash over her. She had studied this particular piece during her own piano lessons years ago, but Marcus's performance revealed layers of meaning and emotion she had never fully understood. His technique was flawless, but it was his artistic sensitivity that truly set him apart. The second piece was more complex, a technical showcase that demonstrated Marcus's incredible skill while never sacrificing musicality for showmanship. His fingers moved across the keys with precision and grace, building to passages of breathtaking intensity before returning to moments of delicate beauty. For his final selection, Marcus performed a piece that Thornfield had composed to celebrate the coronation of Alexander's great-grandfather. The music was inherently regal and triumphant, but Marcus's interpretation brought out subtle themes of responsibility, service, and the weight of leadership that resonated deeply with both Prince Alexander and Princess Isabella. As the final chord resonated through the theater, Marcus sat quietly for a moment, his hands resting on the keys. The silence stretched for several heartbeats before the audience exploded in appreciation. Princess Isabella wiped away a tear, moved by the profound beauty of what she had just experienced. During the brief intermission that followed, Lord Hartwell approached the royal box to check on his distinguished guests. "Are you enjoying the evening, Your Highnesses?" "It's been absolutely extraordinary," Isabella replied. "Each performer has brought something unique and wonderful to the stage. We feel privileged to witness such talent." Alexander nodded in agreement. "The diversity of the program is remarkable. From Elena's operatic brilliance to the brothers' comedy genius to Marcus's musical mastery, it truly showcases the breadth of artistic achievement in our kingdom." As the lights dimmed for the evening's final act, anticipation filled the air. The Skyward Dance Company had earned their reputation as innovators in aerial performance, combining classical dance techniques with breathtaking acrobatics performed high above the stage. Their piece tonight, entitled Flight of the Phoenix, had been specifically choreographed for the royal performance. The stage was transformed once more, this time into a representation of the mythical phoenix's mountainous home. Tall structures created multiple levels, while nearly invisible cables and rigging systems were positioned throughout the space. 7 dancers, dressed in costumes that shimmered like feathers in shades of gold, orange, and crimson, took their positions. As the haunting orchestral music began, the lead dancer, portraying the Phoenix, began a solo that combined floor work with increasingly complex aerial movements. She seemed to defy gravity as she soared through the air, her movements fluid and bird-like, her costume trailing behind her like flames. One by one, the other dancers joined the performance, some representing the spirits of the mountain, others portraying the winds that carried the Phoenix aloft. The choreography was breathtaking in its complexity, with dancers passing each other in mid-air, creating living sculptures that constantly shifted and evolved. Princess Isabella gripped the edge of her seat, both thrilled and slightly terrified by the daring nature of the performance. The dancers made it look effortless, but she could see the incredible strength and precision required for each movement. Prince Alexander was equally mesmerized, appreciating the athletic achievement as much as the artistic beauty. The climax of the piece saw all 7 dancers in the air simultaneously, their movements perfectly synchronized as they portrayed the Phoenix's rebirth from ashes. The lead dancer executed a spectacular sequence that had her spinning and diving through space, supported by her partners in a display of trust and technical mastery that left the audience breathless. As the music reached its crescendo, the dancers created a final tableau that perfectly captured the moment of the Phoenix's triumphant return to the sky. They held the pose for several seconds before gracefully descending to the stage floor for their final bows. The entire theater rose to its feet in thunderous applause, recognizing that they had witnessed something truly special. The Skyward Dance Company had outdone themselves, creating a piece that was both technically stunning and emotionally powerful. Prince Alexander and Princess Isabella applauded long and enthusiastically, their faces glowing with admiration and pride in their kingdom's artistic achievements. As the curtain fell on the final performance, the entire Grandmont Theater resonated with sustained applause that seemed to go on forever. Prince Alexander and Princess Isabella remained standing, their hands raised in continuous appreciation for the extraordinary evening they had just experienced. The audience's enthusiasm was infectious, and several performers had returned to the stage to acknowledge the overwhelming response. "That was absolutely magnificent," Isabella whispered to her husband, as the applause finally began to subside. Her eyes were bright with excitement, and her cheeks were flushed with the emotion of witnessing such incredible artistry. "I've never seen anything quite like it. Each performance was perfect in its own way." Alexander squeezed her hand gently, sharing her enthusiasm completely. "Wait until you meet the performers personally," he said with a knowing smile. "Their passion and dedication is even more inspiring when you hear their individual stories. Some have overcome tremendous obstacles to reach this level of achievement." Lord Hartwell appeared at the entrance to the royal box, his own face glowing with pride and satisfaction. The evening had exceeded even his high expectations, and the obvious delight of the royal couple made his months of careful planning feel completely worthwhile. "Your Highnesses, if you're ready, the performers are gathered in the green salon for the reception. They're all quite eager to meet you." As they made their way through the theater's elegant corridors toward the reception area, Isabella and Alexander were accompanied by their small security detail and several theater officials. The walls of the corridor were lined with photographs from previous royal variety performances, showing decades of talented performers and members of the royal family enjoying this cherished tradition. Isabella paused briefly to examine a photograph from 30 years earlier, showing Alexander's parents, King Edward and Queen Margaret, meeting a young violinist who had gone on to become one of the kingdom's most celebrated musicians. "I hope we can inspire young performers the way your parents did," she said thoughtfully. "I have no doubt that you will," Alexander replied. "Your genuine love for the arts is already making a difference. The performers tonight specifically mentioned how honored they felt to perform for someone who truly appreciates their craft." The Green Salon was a beautifully appointed room adjacent to the main theater, typically used for intimate gatherings and special events. Tonight, it had been transformed into an elegant reception space, with small tables offering light refreshments and comfortable seating areas arranged to encourage conversation. Soft lighting created a warm, welcoming atmosphere that would help everyone feel at ease. As the royal couple entered the salon, all conversation stopped momentarily. The performers, still glowing from their successful evening, stood respectfully as Prince Alexander and Princess Isabella made their entrance. However, the formal moment lasted only briefly before Isabella's warm smile and genuine enthusiasm broke through any lingering nervousness. "Please, please don't let us interrupt your celebration," Isabella said, moving immediately toward Elena Rodriguez, who stood with several other young artists near one of the refreshment tables. "Ms. Rodriguez, your performance was absolutely breathtaking. I've studied opera myself, though at a much more basic level, and I can appreciate the incredible skill and preparation that went into what we heard tonight." Elena's face lit up with joy and surprise. She had expected a brief, formal acknowledgement, but Princess Isabella's knowledgeable and sincere comments meant the world to her. "Your Highness is too kind. I've been training for this moment my entire life, and to perform for you and Prince Alexander has been the greatest honor imaginable. Tell me about your training," Isabella requested, genuinely interested in Elena's journey. "Lord Hartwell mentioned that you come from one of our rural provinces. That must have presented some unique challenges in pursuing classical music education." As Elena began to share her story, a small group naturally formed around them. She spoke of growing up in the village of Millbrook, where her father worked as a blacksmith, and her mother taught at the local school. Music lessons were a luxury the family could barely afford, but her mother had insisted on finding a way when Elena's exceptional voice became apparent at a young age. "The turning point came when Master Giovanni Pellini was traveling through our region, listening for young talent for the Royal Music Academy Scholarship Program," Elena explained. "I was terrified to audition for him, but my mother practically pushed me onto the stage of our little community center." Prince Alexander had joined the conversation, and he was fascinated by Elena's determination and her family's sacrifices. "And Master Pellini recognized your potential immediately?" "He was very kind," Elena said modestly, "but he also made it clear that natural talent was only the beginning. The real work would be the years of training, study, and practice required to develop that talent into something worthy of stages like this one." Isabella nodded thoughtfully. "That's true of all great achievements, isn't it? The foundation may be a gift, but the structure is built through dedication and hard work. We're so grateful for your commitment to excellence." As their conversation continued, other guests gradually joined the group, including Elena's parents, who had been invited as special guests for the evening. Her father, a large man with work-worn hands and a shy smile, was clearly overwhelmed by the royal attention, while her mother beamed with pride as she watched her daughter converse confidently with the princess. Alexander excused himself from the group to seek out the Blackwood brothers, who were entertaining a small crowd near the windows overlooking the theater gardens. Harold and Frederick had changed from their ridiculous guard costumes into elegant evening wear, but their natural humor and warmth remained unchanged. "Your Royal Highness," Harold said with a theatrical bow, "we hope our humble attempts at humor didn't offend your royal sensibilities." Alexander laughed heartily. Quite the opposite. Isabella and I found your performance brilliant. Comedy requires such precision in timing and such deep understanding of human nature. How long have you been developing your act? Frederick jumped in enthusiastically. We've been performing together since we were children, but this particular routine has evolved over the past 2 years. We spend months refining each joke, each gesture, each pause. People think comedy is spontaneous, but it's actually one of the most calculated art forms. That's fascinating, Alexander replied. I imagine performing before such a diverse audience presents unique challenges. You have to appeal to children and adults, locals and visitors, people from all walks of life. Harold nodded seriously. Exactly. We try to find the universal human experiences that everyone can relate to. The little embarrassments, the social awkwardnesses, the gap between how we want to appear and how we actually behave. Tonight, the Royal Protocol theme worked because everyone has felt nervous about proper behavior in formal situations. Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of Marcus Chen, the pianist, who had been quietly observing the various groups from a corner of the room. Alexander immediately extended his hand in greeting, having been particularly moved by Marcus's musical interpretation. Mr. Chen, your performance tonight was truly extraordinary, Alexander said warmly. The way you brought out the emotional depth in Master Thornfield's compositions was remarkable. You made me hear familiar pieces in completely new ways. Marcus, a soft-spoken man with intelligent eyes, seemed pleased but not surprised by the praise. Your Royal Highness, Master Thornfield's works contain such rich emotional landscapes. I've spent years studying his compositions, trying to understand not just the technical requirements but the feelings and experiences that inspired him. Tonight felt like a conversation across the centuries. Isabella approached their group, having concluded her conversation with Elena and her family. Mr. Chen, I wanted to thank you personally. Your interpretation of the coronation piece was particularly meaningful. It made me think about the deeper significance of royal service, beyond the ceremony and tradition. Marcus's eyes brightened with understanding. That piece has always fascinated me because Master Thornfield managed to capture both the grandeur and the burden of leadership. The triumphant passages represent the honor and celebration, but there are subtle minor themes that speak to the weight of responsibility and the sacrifices required for true service. Alexander and Isabella exchanged a meaningful glance, both recognizing how perfectly Marcus had understood and conveyed the complex emotions they felt about their own roles. The composer's insight, filtered through Marcus's sensitive interpretation, had created a musical mirror of their own experiences. As the evening progressed, the royal couple made their way around the entire room, spending meaningful time with each performer and many of the other guests. They met with representatives from the Skyward Dance Company, learning about the months of preparation required for their aerial choreography and the intense physical conditioning necessary for such demanding performances. The lead dancer, Marina Volkov, explained how the company had developed their unique style by combining classical ballet training with circus arts and modern dance techniques. Each performance requires absolute trust between partners, she explained. When you're 20 feet in the air, depending on your colleagues for safety, you develop a connection that goes beyond ordinary teamwork. Isabella was particularly interested in the company's outreach programs, which brought simplified versions of their performances to schools and community centers throughout the kingdom. We believe that exposure to the arts should be available to everyone, Marina said passionately. A child who sees our performance might be inspired to pursue dance or music or any form of creative expression. As the reception began to wind down, Lord Hartwell approached the royal couple with a final request. Your Highnesses, it's traditional for distinguished guests to sign our visitor's book. Many illustrious performers and royal family members have left their thoughts over the years. The visitor's book was an elegant leather-bound volume, filled with pages of comments from previous Royal Variety performances. Isabella read several entries from past years, noting the consistent themes of gratitude, inspiration, and appreciation for artistic achievement. When it came time for her to write, she chose her words carefully. Tonight we have witnessed the extraordinary talent and dedication of remarkable artists who have honored us with their gifts. Their performances remind us why the arts are essential to the human spirit, bringing beauty, joy, and truth into our lives. We are grateful for this tradition and proud to support the continued flourishing of artistic achievement in our beloved kingdom, with admiration and appreciation. Alexander signed below his wife's entry, adding his own brief but heartfelt comments about the importance of supporting young artists and preserving cultural traditions for future generations. As they prepared to leave the theater, several performers gathered near the entrance to bid them farewell. The spontaneous group included Elena Rodriguez with her parents, the Blackwood brothers, Marcus Chen, and Marina Volkov, representing the Skyward Dance Company. Other guests and theater staff formed a respectful circle around the informal goodbye. "Thank you all for an absolutely magical evening," Isabella said, her voice carrying genuine emotion. "You've given us memories we'll treasure always, and you've reminded us why supporting the arts is one of our most important responsibilities." Elena stepped forward shyly, carrying a small wrapped package. "Your Highness, if I may, I have a small token of appreciation. It's a recording of tonight's aria made by the theater's sound engineers. I wanted you to have something to remember this evening." Isabella accepted the gift graciously, clearly touched by the thoughtful gesture. "This is incredibly generous, Ms. Rodriguez. I will treasure it always." As the royal couple made their way to their waiting car, accompanied by the warm applause of everyone gathered in the theater's lobby, they both felt a deep sense of satisfaction and joy. The evening had exceeded all their expectations, providing not just entertainment, but genuine connection with the artistic community they were privileged to support. During the quiet ride back to the palace, Isabella and Alexander reflected on the evening's experiences. "I feel like we truly connected with each performer tonight," Isabella said thoughtfully. "It wasn't just formal protocol. We learned about their lives, their challenges, their passion for their art." Alexander nodded, watching the city lights pass by their window. "That's what makes these events so valuable. The performances themselves are magnificent, but the personal interactions remind us that behind every artistic achievement are real people, with dreams, struggles, and incredible dedication." "I already have ideas for how we can expand our support for the arts," Isabella said eagerly. "Perhaps we could establish additional scholarships for young performers from rural areas like Elena, or create a program that brings performances to communities that don't typically have access to professional arts." As their car passed through the palace gates, both Prince Alexander and Princess Isabella knew that tonight's Royal Variety performance had been more than just a successful royal engagement. It had deepened their appreciation for the artists who enriched their kingdom's cultural life and strengthened their commitment to ensuring that future generations would have the same opportunities to experience and create beautiful art. The golden lights of the palace welcomed them home, but they carried with them the magic of the evening. The soaring notes of Elena's aria, the laughter inspired by the Blackwood brothers, the emotional depth of Marcus's piano mastery, and the breathtaking beauty of the Skyward Dance Company's aerial artistry. These memories would inspire their continued support for the arts and remind them always of the transformative power of human creativity and artistic expression.